don't know about you, Darren, but I'm fed up of the British public having to fund this woke nonsense. A recent article came out saying that Manchester is funding £5 million of taxpayer money going towards woke projects, including anti-Priti Patel artwork, and also there's like this blank space which I'll put up on the screen saying that this is to display the absence of black women's artwork. Instead of actually showing the abilities of black artists, they just show this like performative nonsense. What do you think about that, Darren?
Well, hey, I wish I could get paid for showing a blank room, right? I bet they've made a pretty penny from that, Jess. What a novel experience. What a great idea to make a few bucks from the artsy scene who are, applauding that kind of whackery and wokery over, artistry and craft. I mean, it's just nonsense. I mean, Manchester itself, Jess, as you well know, it has a rich heritage, right, of being, well, it ought to be immensely proud of. We often think of, I think, London and Scotland as being the sort of bastions of the Enlightenment movement, but Manchester was very much at the forefront as well. Those liberal values that I think you and I certainly espouse, and I mean that in a classically liberal sense, they imagine, I doubt they can actually look at what's going on today if we were to bring them back from the dead, the kind of people that were at the forefront of that movement, looking at the fact that Nicola Sturgeon can't tell what a man is and what a woman is, the basics of biology. And these days, these places, whether it be London, Manchester, or Scotland, they seem to be hotbeds for whackery and wokery over any form of enlightenment and scientific research. It just seems like the days of advancing in science, arts, philosophy, they're all behind us. And as far as seeing them as the building blocks of a modern society, instead we now see millions of pounds being spent on blatant anti-Britain, anti-government propaganda that's masquerading as art. I mean, if you consider in an art gallery, I think you should have the freedom to display whatever you want. Fine. I believe in that, right? I believe in the freedom of association. I believe in the freedom of expression and all the rest of it. But I don't believe that you should be able to milk the taxpayer teat, which is squeezed within an inch of its life, Jess, where we're all saying, please, Mr. Hunt, don't take any more of our cash. And they're spending it, wasting millions on this sort of thing. I mean, consider the fact that 14 million people voted Tory in 2019. That's 14 million people that I dare say would be pretty relaxed about the government saying it wants to combat the small boats, it wants to combat mass migration to this country. And the joke's on them, frankly, Jess, because I don't know what these artists have been looking at, but if you look through any newspaper at the minute, the Conservative government basically are doing everything that they want on immigration, right? We've had 500,000 people come here last year. It was a million in total, net of 500,000. I mean, that strikes me as a pretty liberal, open border policy. I don't know about you.
I mean, it's the fact that so much money are going towards these useless, well, I think there's use in art, but these hyper-partisan projects, shaming Priti Patel, and this identity politics type of projects as well. When we're in a cost living crisis, people have to choose between heating and eating. People are going on strike. Nurses are going on strike. The NHS is in such a crisis. This money could be better spent elsewhere.
Oh, absolutely, unquestionably, undoubtedly it could, right? I mean, why not support, I don't know, things like, local community art centres where kids can go and learn a craft or things like that. I don't understand why it needs to be spent on these metropolitan hubs just to have an attack at the Tory government. It does smack me as indulgence in the extreme. And the government, taxpayers, shouldn't be coerced into funding this kind of propaganda. It's not art, it is political propaganda. And it all smacks of going back to this idea you mentioned, Blair, earlier, this march through the institutions. The Labour Party, in their time in government, have been a hell of a lot better than any Conservative at actually getting their people into these institutions, onto these boards of the Arts Council and all the rest of it. And, these are the fruits of that progress or lack of progress. And they've only got themselves to blame, Jess, I'm afraid. I don't have any sympathy for the Tory government here, because at the end of the day, they're the ones in charge of the public purse. And they're about as good at protecting that as, a Kardashian is on Hollywood Boulevard, spending vast sums of cash on goodness only knows what.